My name is Valentina. I'm 31 years old. And to be perfectly honest, I've spent most of my life feeling like I don't truly belong anywhere. It's not that I'm invisible to the world, far from it. I have a stable job, a decent life, and an outwardly fulfilling existence. But when I really stop and think about it, I've always been the background character in my own story. I work as a marketing coordinator at a small but growing tech company. It's a decent job, though it doesn't exactly set my heart on fire. Every morning I sit at a desk, glued to a computer screen, making decisions that impact the company in small ways, fixing details here and there, solving minor problems. It's steady work, but it's not what I imagined for myself when I was younger. It's not what I envisioned when I dreamed of making an impact, of building something meaningful. The job is secure, yes, but there's no passion in it, no spark. I do it because I have to, because I need to pay the bills and keep my head above water. At home, things are no different. I grew up as the middle child, always in the shadow of my older brother, who was the golden child, and my younger sister, who was the baby of the family. My brother, Alex, has always been the one with the charisma, the leadership qualities, the success that others could point to and admire. He's the one my parents brag about at family gatherings, the one who gets all the attention. And my sister, Lily, well, she's the artist. She's free-spirited, bold, and effortlessly cool in the way that I could never seem to be. She's the one who makes everyone laugh and feel at ease. And then there's me. I'm the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who holds everything together when things fall apart. I'm the person they turn to when someone needs advice, or when there's a crisis to be handled. But that's all I am: useful, dependable, and, in many ways, unnoticed. The truth is, no one seems to look at me and see anything remarkable. They see a woman who quietly keeps everything running, who picks up the pieces, but never quite stands out. I'm always the support, never the star. I've always felt a little out of place in my own family. They love me. I know they do. But I've never been the one who gets noticed. My brother's accomplishments are discussed at dinner, while I sit quietly, offering the occasional good job or nod of agreement. Lily's latest art exhibition or her latest project is the talk of the table, and everyone praises her for her creative spirit. I, on the other hand, am always the one who gets the "oh, that's nice" response. It's as if my existence is defined by my ability to help, rather than by what I am. I'm not complaining. Well, maybe I am a little. It's just that there are times when I wish I could be seen for something more than what I can do for others. I wish I could be seen for who I am, not just for my ability to clean up messes and put out fires. And it's not that I don't love my family. I do. But there's always this undercurrent of feeling like I'm not enough, like I'm not really contributing to the story. My life feels like it's on the sidelines, watching everyone else live out their grand adventures. I've tried to ignore it for years, tried to tell myself that being the dependable one was enough. After all, people need reliability. But as I get older, I find myself questioning whether that's enough. What happens when I'm no longer the one they turn to? When the role of caretaker and fixer is no longer necessary? Will I still matter? Or will I just fade away, forgotten like so many of the quiet moments I've lived through? So here I am, 31 years old, standing at the crossroads of my life. I've always been the person everyone else relied on. But when was the last time anyone really saw me? When was the last time anyone stopped to ask what I wanted, what I needed, or what made me happy? It's like I don't exist outside of their expectations. The day of my brother's wedding was supposed to be a day of celebration, a day of joy and love. But for me, it became the day my life turned upside down, the day I realized that nothing in my world was as it seemed. It all started when my brother, Alex, announced that his wedding was going to be a grand affair. The venue was a luxurious estate in the heart of the city, costing over $150 to rent for the evening. Everything about the event screamed opulence, a guest list of over 300 people, each with a carefully chosen seat, a 5-course dinner prepared by a renowned chef, and a band flown in from New York to play at the reception. To everyone else, it was the perfect wedding, a dream come true. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As the day unfolded, the tension that had been building for months became impossible to ignore. My parents had been stressing the importance of the day, of making sure everything went smoothly. They were counting on this wedding to not only be a personal triumph for Alex, but also a public one. It was a chance to show the world the kind of success he had achieved and, by extension, to validate their own choices and sacrifices as parents. For me, it was just another occasion where I would be the quiet observer, the one who made sure everything went according to plan, without ever being in the spotlight. But it wasn't just my own role in the event that started to eat at me. It was what happened when I arrived at the venue. As I stepped into the grand hall, I immediately noticed that something was missing my name. I had assumed that, of course, my name would be on the list of primary guests. After all, I was his sister, and we had always been close, despite the typical sibling rivalry. But when I checked the seating chart, I saw that I was seated in the second-tier section, far from the front of the room. While friends of the bride and her family members were seated at the best tables, the feeling of being relegated to the background hit me like a slap in the face. When I walked over to the wedding coordinator to inquire, she politely informed me that my seat had been reassigned due to space constraints. My brother's childhood friend, someone he hadn't spoken to in years, was seated where I had expected to be. It was an awkward moment, but I smiled and nodded, telling myself it was just a small thing in the grand scheme of things. But deep down, the sting was deep, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Then, as the wedding ceremony started, everything went downhill. During the reception, as the speeches began, my brother raised his glass to thank everyone for coming and to celebrate his new life with his bride, Emily. It was supposed to be a moment of love and gratitude, a moment of family unity, but instead, Alex's words cut through the air like a knife. "I want to thank my family," he said, his eyes glancing over at me for a brief second, "for always supporting me and standing by me through everything. But today, I want to focus on the future, and especially on Emily, the love of my life. Together, we'll conquer everything, and I hope that all of you will support us as we move forward into this new chapter." I watched as Emily smiled at him, her eyes glinting with affection. I couldn't help but notice the way she looked at him like he was her prize, her conquest, and in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before I had been sidelined in my own family's story. Alex had built his future with Emily, while I remained just the reliable sister who would always pick up the pieces. But the real shock came later, after the speeches, when I found myself alone in a quiet corner of the venue. I had been minding my own business, sipping on champagne. When Emily walked up to me, she gave me a smile that was almost too perfect, too practiced. "I heard you co-signed for the house with Alex," she said, her voice smooth and cold. "That's really sweet of you. Valentina, I'm sure you're happy to know that your contribution helped make his dreams come true." Her words hit me like a wave. I had no idea what she was talking about at first, but as she continued to speak, the realization slowly started to sink in. Alex had left me with half of a $200,000 mortgage, a property I had invested in financially, emotionally, and with all my trust, but I hadn't known that the house was no longer part of his dream. In fact, it seemed he'd already made plans to sell it and to take the proceeds for himself. "I'm sure you'll be fine," Emily added, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "After all, you're the dependable one, right? Always fixing everyone else's mess." My heart sank. How long had this been going on? How long had I been the silent supporter, the one who had been taken advantage of while everyone else enjoyed their happy endings? When I confronted Alex later, he was dismissive. He told me that I should have known better, that I should have protected my interests. He didn't apologize, didn't express any regret. He was too busy basking in the glow of his wedding day. Too busy with Emily and the new life they were planning together. "Don't worry, Val," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You'll get your share when everything's settled. But right now, I've got bigger things to focus on. This is about Emily and me." My stomach churned. I realized that I had been left holding the bag, not only financially, but emotionally. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever imagined. The amount of money didn't matter anymore. What hurt the most was the fact that I had been nothing more than an afterthought in my brother's life, just like I had been in my family's story for years. And in that moment, as I watched Alex and Emily dance together in the spotlight, I knew I had to make a choice. Would I continue to let myself be invisible, to let others use me as a stepping stone for their own success? Or would I find a way to break free and finally build a life of my own? The moment I walked away from Alex and Emily, everything felt like it was collapsing around me. My heart pounded in my chest as I stumbled out of the reception hall. The extravagant decorations, the laughter, the music, all of it seemed to mock me. I had spent my entire life putting others first, helping them, supporting them, and yet here I was, standing in the cold night air, feeling like a fool. My hands trembled, and I fought to catch my breath as I stood alone by the parking lot, trying to make sense of everything that had just unfolded. The pain wasn't just about the betrayal. It was the realization that my entire life, my efforts, my sacrifices, had been nothing more than an afterthought. The money, the mortgage, the house that I had helped buy, all of it was now a burden I had to bear alone. Alex's words echoed in my mind. "You'll get your share when everything's settled." It felt like a slap in the face. When everything's settled, what did that even mean? Was I supposed to just wait for him to decide when he would settle things, when his shiny new life with Emily was already in full swing? I leaned against the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my vision blurry with unshed tears. How did I get here? I had trusted him. I had poured my heart and soul into that relationship, believing that we were building a future together. We had shared a life. We had shared finances. But now, in the blink of an eye, all of that was gone. I had been the one who worked overtime to make sure he could follow his dreams, the one who believed that love could conquer all. But here I was, holding the pieces of a shattered future, and in this moment, all I could feel was overwhelming disappointment. Did I mean nothing to him? Did he never see me as someone worthy of his loyalty, his respect? I could barely breathe. The ache in my chest felt like a physical weight, one that pressed down on me with each passing second. It was hard to fathom that I had been reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale, a stepping stone in his journey. And the worst part was that I didn't even have the luxury of being angry at him. It wasn't just Alex who had betrayed me, it was everyone. The family I had sacrificed so much for, the people I had bent over backwards to please, had turned a blind eye to my pain. They had all been so caught up in the glamour of the wedding, so fixated on the celebration, that not one of them bothered to ask how I was doing. Not one of them seemed to care that I was standing there, alone, in a financial mess of my own making. And why? Because I had always been the reliable one. I had always been the one who took care of things for everyone else. But now, I was invisible. I had been invisible all along, hidden behind the roles of good daughter, supportive sister, reliable friend. As the realization settled in, a wave of coldness washed over me. I felt so small, so insignificant. All the times I had put my own dreams and desires aside for the sake of others. All the times I had silenced my own needs in favor of their expectations, it had all been for nothing. I had built my life around other people, around what they needed from me, around what they wanted, and now I had nothing left. No partner, no security, and certainly no support. It was then that something inside me snapped. I was done with being the background character in my own story. Done with waiting for validation from people who would never see me as more than what they needed. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. That I was fine. I wasn't fine. I had been a fool. And I had allowed myself to be used. No more. I made the decision then and there to cut ties, not just with Alex, but with everyone. I couldn't stay in this toxic cycle anymore. Surrounded by people who would never truly see me, I couldn't keep being the person who always cleaned up the messes, always showed up, always did the right thing, only to be left with nothing when I needed help. The next day, I started making calls. I reached out to a realtor and put the house on the market. The house that I had once believed would be the foundation of our future, our family, was now just a symbol of my mistakes. It was time to let it go. I needed to rid myself of anything that reminded me of the life I had tried so hard to build with him. And it wasn't just the house. I sold off my luxury car, an Audi Q7 that I had bought with our joint savings. The car that once represented success, status, and the dreams of a future with someone I love now, it was just another reminder of my misplaced trust. I sold it for $50, $1,000, barely covering the debt that was now my burden. It was painful, but it was necessary. I started cutting back on everything. No more unnecessary expenses. No more pretending that I could keep up appearances. I had to face the truth. I had to get out of this mess on my own. No one was going to rescue me. No one was going to swoop in and save the day. It was just me, and I needed to find a way out. I spent the next few weeks in a haze of determination. I was numb, but I was moving. I kept my distance from my family, avoiding their calls and texts. I couldn't bear the thought of facing them. They had no idea what I was going through. They had no idea how deeply they had failed me. And maybe, deep down, I was angry at them too. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. I had to keep moving forward. Had to focus on getting out of the hole I had dug for myself. I remember sitting in my small apartment one night, staring at the empty walls, the reality of my situation finally settling in. I had lost so much, but for the first time in years, I felt something like freedom. Maybe I didn't have the life I had planned, but I had the chance to build something new. It wouldn't be easy, but I had no choice now. I couldn't go back, and I wasn't going to let anyone, least of all Alex, define who I was ever again. I knew it was going to be hard. I knew it was going to take time, but for the first time in a long time, I was taking control of my own life, and that, at least, was something I could hold on to. It had been almost a year since I had walked away from the wreckage of my relationship with Alex, and the weight that had once been so heavy had begun to lift. Each passing day brought a sense of clarity, of purpose. As I focused on rebuilding my life, I threw myself into my work, pouring my energy into creating an online health and wellness business that I had always dreamed of, but had never dared to pursue. It wasn't easy. There were late nights, countless hours of learning, and many moments of doubt, but little by little, things started to fall into place. Within months, my business began to take off. I built a loyal customer base, primarily through word of mouth and social media marketing. People loved the products, the authentic approach I took, and the fact that I was real about my journey. Slowly, the financial strain I had been carrying for so long began to ease. I sold off my remaining possessions, including the last of my debts, and one day, I was able to pay off the mortgage I had once shared with Alex. The house was no longer a reminder of the betrayal. It was a symbol of my own strength and resilience. By the time I reached the 1-year mark, I had turned my life around in ways I had never thought possible. I had saved up enough to buy properties in several cities. With a total worth of over $5 million, I was no longer just the dependable, invisible sister, the one always in the background. I had become someone people respected, someone who had built something from nothing. My success had been hard-won, and I knew it, but I also knew that this was only the beginning. It was at a family reunion that everything came full circle, and the universe decided to remind me of how far I had come. I had been dreading this day, knowing that Alex and Emily would be there, celebrating their perfect life. They had invited me, but I had been hesitant to go, unsure of how I would feel seeing them together, knowing how they had taken everything from me, but something inside me pushed me to attend. I knew I had to face them, to see if I could truly leave the past behind. When I arrived at my parents' house, I felt a sense of unease wash over me. There they were, sitting together on the couch, Alex, looking every bit the successful man he had tried to portray. And Emily, her arm draped across his shoulder in that all-too-familiar way. They were laughing, talking to my parents, who were all smiles as usual. I stood at the door for a moment, gathering myself. As I stepped inside, I noticed that Alex's eyes met mine briefly, and there was a flicker of something there. Guilt, maybe. Or perhaps it was just recognition that I had changed. But whatever it was, it didn't last long. Emily quickly stood up and made her way toward me, her smile wide, though there was a noticeable edge to it. "Valentina," she said with forced cheerfulness. "So good to see you. We were just talking about how things are going with your business. How's it all working out?" I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "It's going well. I've been focusing on expanding, and things are taking off." "Oh, that's wonderful," Emily said, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "I'm sure you've been working hard. It must be nice to have all that time for yourself now, that you don't have to take care of everyone else." I could feel the subtle jab in her words. She had always been like that, sharp, calculating. She had never once acknowledged the sacrifices I had made for Alex, for our shared life, for our future, and now she was pretending to care about my business. I could tell it wasn't genuine. Before I could respond, Alex stood up, giving me a tight smile. His demeanor was different now. There was no longer the cocky confidence he had once had, no longer the man who thought he could do no wrong. He looked smaller. He wasn't the person I had once admired, and the realization hit me hard. "Val," he began, his voice a little too casual. "I've been meaning to talk to you. You know, we've all been through a lot over the past year. I'm really sorry for how things ended between us." I couldn't stop myself from scoffing. His apology felt hollow, like an afterthought. The hurt and the anger that had been buried inside me for so long started to bubble to the surface. "I'm sorry too, Alex," I said, my voice sharp. "But you don't get to apologize now. Not after everything you've done. You don't get to come back into my life when it's convenient for you." I could see him wince at my words. But there was more. The look in his eyes told me he had something else on his mind. He hesitated for a moment, then spoke again, this time with more urgency. "Look, I know things didn't end well, but I need your help. I'm in a bad place right now. Emily and we've been struggling. I'm working a job I hate, and I can't keep up with the bills. I'm asking if you could lend me some money, just enough to get us back on our feet." I stood there in stunned silence. It took everything in me not to laugh, but my body was shaking with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're asking me for money?" Alex's face flushed with embarrassment. He looked around the room, hoping someone else would come to his defense. But my parents had fallen silent, clearly unsure of how to respond. Emily, who had been so confident just moments before, now seemed uncomfortable, shifting in her seat. "Please, Val," Alex pressed. "I know I've messed up, but I'm not asking for much, just a little help. I know you've done well for yourself." My mind was racing. A year ago, I would have done anything to help him, to fix the mess he had made. But now, I realized how far I had come. I had built something real for myself, and here he was, the man who had left me with nothing but debt, now asking for a handout. "I've worked hard for everything I have, Alex," I said, my voice cold. "Everything. And you think I'm just going to give you money after everything you've done?" His eyes dropped to the floor, and Emily remained silent. There was no more bravado, no more pretense. They were both exposed for what they were, two people who had never truly valued me, who had taken advantage of my kindness and my resources without a second thought. And in that moment, as I looked at Alex, I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in a long time power. I was no longer the woman who had been left behind, the one who was discarded when she was no longer useful. I had become someone who had built a life on her own terms. I think you need to figure things out on your own, Alex, I said, my voice steady. I'm not your safety net anymore. You've already taken everything from me once. I won't let you do it again. There was a long silence. My parents, who had been watching the exchange with growing discomfort, finally spoke up, their voices filled with regret. We had no idea things had gone this far, my mother said, her tone tinged with guilt. We never should have let it get this way. And in that moment, I knew that everything had changed. It wasn't just Alex and Emily who had to see me for who I really was. It was my whole family. They could no longer dismiss me, could no longer take me for granted. I had found my own worth, and nothing would ever make me lose it again. As I left the room, a strange sense of peace washed over me. For the first time, I wasn't seeking their approval. I didn't need their validation. I had built my life on my own, and no one could take that away from me. You will never define me again, I whispered to myself, walking away from the past. I am enough. The air in the room felt thick with tension as I stood before Alex, my ex, the man who had once held my heart, and yet, in so many ways, had shattered it beyond repair. I hadn't seen him since the day he walked out of my life, leaving me with nothing but empty promises and a pile of debt that took months to clear. But now, here we were, face to face, in the same room, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could finally breathe without the weight of uncertainty on my shoulders. I had thought about this moment for a long time. In the months following our breakup, I had spent countless nights awake, replaying everything, every word, every look, every mistake I had made, the guilt, the anger, the regret. I had convinced myself that I wasn't enough, that if only I had tried harder, been more patient, more forgiving, maybe things would have turned out differently. But standing here now, I realized the truth was much simpler. I wasn't the problem. He was. The room felt too small as I stared at him, taking in the tired lines around his eyes, the way he avoided meeting mine. He wasn't the confident, unshakable person I had once known. He was a man who had failed, who had been reduced to asking for help after he had destroyed everything we had built, and yet, he still had the audacity to stand before me, expecting forgiveness. I didn't expect it to be like this, Alex began, his voice wavering, almost apologetic. I didn't expect everything to fall apart the way it did. I know I messed up, but I need help. I don't know how else to say it. My stomach churned. It took everything in me not to let the flood of emotions, rage, betrayal, and disgust take over. Instead, I held my ground, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment before speaking. Help, I repeated, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. You've got to be kidding me. Alex, after everything you've done, after how you left me to pick up the pieces of a life we built together, you think I'm just going to hand you a lifeline? You think I'm just going to fix your mess again? His eyes widened in disbelief, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of that arrogance he used to carry so easily, but it faded quickly, replaced by an almost pitiful expression. Val, I'm not asking for much, just a little support, a loan to get back on my feet. You've built something. You've made it. You can help me, can't you? The audacity of his words hit me like a slap to the face. I can help him. The same man who had left me alone with the financial burden of our home. The same man who had taken everything from me and left me scrambling to rebuild my life. How could he stand there and think I would give him anything more? No, I said, my voice firm. Without hesitation, I won't help you. I gave you my trust, my love, and you tore it apart. I'm not here to pick up the pieces of your life. You're on your own now. Alex, I'm done. I could feel the weight of my words settle into the space between us. His face reddened. His jaw clenched as if he wanted to argue. But he didn't. The truth was there, hanging in the air. Undeniable. He had no power over me anymore, and I was done giving him any. "You're not the person I thought you were," I continued, my voice quiet now, but still sharp. "I've learned the hard way that my worth is not tied to you or anyone else. I'm not responsible for your happiness or your success. I'm not your safety net anymore, and I never will be again." For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes, but it was too late for regret. He had burned all his bridges with me. I had spent years believing that love could fix everything, that I could be the one to make everything right. But no more. I was finally free from the emotional chains he had wrapped around me for so long. "I hope you figure things out, Alex," I said, my tone now more neutral. No longer angry, just resolute. "But don't ever come to me for help again. Not for money, not for support, not for anything. I've given all I'm going to give." He stood there, frozen, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to say something. But no words came out. The silence between us was thick with everything unsaid. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he turned and walked away without another word. As he left, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't anger that I felt anymore, it was clarity. I had finally asserted my boundaries, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my power. But this wasn't just about Alex. This was about everyone about the family I had spent so many years trying to please. The people who had unknowingly allowed Alex's actions to go unchecked. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I couldn't keep playing the role of the dutiful daughter, the reliable sister, the one who always made things work at her own expense. That night, I confronted my parents. "I need to talk to you both," I said, sitting down in front of them at the dinner table, my voice calm but unwavering. They looked at each other, surprised by my tone. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" my mother asked, her voice soft, like she expected it to be something trivial. "This can't keep happening," I began, my words deliberate. "I'm tired of being the person everyone leans on, of constantly cleaning up messes that aren't mine to clean. I'm tired of being invisible, of being the one who sacrifices everything for the sake of others while no one sees me for who I am." My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and my mother's expression softened, but I could see the flicker of guilt in their eyes. They had never seen me as anything more than the dependable one, the one who always did what was expected of her. But I wasn't that person anymore. "I've spent so many years doing what you wanted, doing what everyone wanted," I continued, my voice getting stronger, "but I won't do it anymore. I won't be the one who picks up the pieces when everyone else lets me down. I'm building my own life now, and it's not for any of you. It's for me." There was a long silence as my words sank in. My parents didn't know how to respond. They had always seen me as the reliable one, the one who would always be there. But now, I was telling them that I couldn't be that person anymore. "We never meant to take you for granted, Val," my father said, his voice quiet. "But we understand. We do." I looked at them both, my heart heavy with everything that had been left unsaid over the years. "I'm not asking for your approval. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you that I'm done. I'm going to live my life the way I want to, and that's no longer something I'm willing to sacrifice." For the first time, my parents were silent not out of anger, but out of an understanding that I had changed. And in that silence, I knew that everything was different. They would have to see me, really see me, for the first time, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. I had set my boundaries, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had finally found myself. As I stand here now, in the quiet of my apartment, with the hum of the city outside my window, I can't help but reflect on everything that has led me to this point. It's been a year since I made the choice to walk away from the life I thought I was supposed to have, the life that was supposed to be filled with love, security, and the kind of happiness that only comes from the validation of others. I used to think that I needed approval, that I needed to be seen and recognized by my family, by my ex, by everyone who ever doubted me or overlooked me. But now, I see things so differently. I've learned that my worth is not, and never was, dependent on the opinions of others. For years, I allowed myself to be shaped by their expectations, their desires, their needs. I kept bending, kept sacrificing, kept silencing my own desires, believing that if I just did enough, loved enough, gave enough, eventually I would be acknowledged. But that's not how it works. I was never going to be enough for them if I wasn't first enough for myself. I've spent so much of my life trying to earn the right to exist, to be worthy of love, to be recognized for my worth. But now I realize that my worth was never something that needed to be earned. It was there all along, quietly waiting for me to recognize it, and I finally have. My life is no longer about trying to fit into the mold that others have set for me. It's about living authentically, making decisions that honor who I truly am. And in doing so, I've found freedom, not just financial freedom, although I've achieved that too, in ways I could never have imagined, but emotional freedom, the freedom to choose for myself, the freedom to live my life on my own terms. I often think about Alex, what he did, how he left me with nothing, how he never saw me for who I truly was, and how, in his eyes, I was always just the background character, the one who would clean up the messes and take care of everything. And I wonder, does he regret it? Does he ever look back at the wreckage he left behind and wish he had made different choices? Does he wish he had treated me with the respect I deserved, the way I treated him? But then, as I stand here, looking at everything I've built, I realize something. It doesn't matter. His regrets are his own, not mine. I can't spend another moment worrying about his remorse, or whether he ever truly understood my worth. That's his burden, not mine. My life is no longer about what he did to me or what my family expected from me. It's about the choices I make from this moment on. It's about the life I am choosing for myself every single day. I wonder, if you were in my shoes, if you had the chance to start over, to build a life that was truly your own, what would you do? Would you stay tied to the past, to the people who never saw your worth, never acknowledged your value? Or would you walk away, find your own path, and build a future that is filled with your own dreams, your own desires, your own sense of freedom? It's not an easy question. I know that. It's easier to stay, to keep living in the shadows of others, to keep playing the role that everyone expects you to play. But if there's one thing I've learned over this past year, it's that staying in a place where you're not valued, where you're not truly seen for who you are, is not living, it's merely existing. I've learned that forgiveness is important not for the other person, but for yourself. I've forgiven Alex, not because he deserves it, but because I deserve to be free from the weight of bitterness and resentment. But forgiveness does not mean forgetting. And it certainly does not mean allowing the same mistakes to be repeated. It means choosing to let go of the past and moving forward, not for anyone else, but for me. So, what about you? How much of your life have you been living for others? How much of yourself have you sacrificed in order to fit into the box they've created for you? And most importantly, what will you do now? Will you continue to live for their approval? Or will you step into the life that is waiting for you, the one you've been too afraid to claim? The answer is yours, and only yours. But here's what I know: the moment you choose to stop living for others and start living for yourself, you'll realize that the world opens up in ways you never thought possible. The freedom, the peace, the joy, it's all there, waiting for you to embrace it. And that, my friends, is the most valuable thing I've discovered. I am enough, and so are you. So, what will you choose?